It is my privilege to welcome you to worship today at First Christian Church, Olathe, wherever you are across this community. I'm grateful for your presence. I want you to hear me say that we are still church. In every sense of that word, we are still church. We are the body of Christ. Though we may not be physically present here, we are the body of Christ, scattered across our community wherever we live. But it is a very different way of being church, because it's very strange not to have you here in the sanctuary with me. I want to reassure you, though, some things are still happening. Kimberly, our administrative assistant, is still checking on the office. She's checking emails and checking the voicemail. Others are showing up to take care of the daily business and the life of the church. Our church board met by email this week and affirmed Neil Heckman to be our new outreach department chair. So I'm very excited and grateful to Neil for taking on that role. Things are continuing to happen. The electric bill is getting paid. Payroll is still being met. We very much plan to continue to care for this building and nurture ministry here until the time when we can meet again. And I would ask, if you have not had the opportunity yet to share your March tithes and offerings with our congregation, please put that in the mail so that it will enable us to continue to take care of the ministry here and our staff. I don't know. I watch the news just like you. I don't know when we will be able to gather in this place again. But we will continue to post on Facebook, to send out emails, to post on our website, to make phone calls, to mail out letters. In whatever way we can, we will try to communicate with you about the ministry that is being carried on and about when we will be able to be together again. So I would ask now, if you'd like, you might grab that Bible off your shelf or go to your bedroom or grab wherever that Bible is and bring it to your space where you're going to sit and watch this, and open it up to Mark chapter 13. That's the chapter we'll be in today. And secondly, you may never have done this before, maybe you have, but I would encourage you to prepare the Lord's table. Wherever you are, on your coffee table, on your kitchen table, by your chair. So you might want to pause just a moment and go and find some bread or a cracker, get a cup of water or a cup of juice, and have those sitting right there beside you, because when the sermon is finished today, I will move to the communion table, say the words of institution, and invite you to share communion. I will not be naming specific people's names during our time of prayer, since this is being posted to public space. But I want you to know that you can be on our church's prayer email list. So if you would like to make sure you know about the prayer concerns in the life of our church, you can do that either by email or by phone. So you can send me an email and I will add you to the list. Or you can leave a phone message here at the office, and we will get you added to the phone chain so that you will know of the prayer needs in the life of our church. And secondly, if you have a prayer request that you want to share with us, please send me an email or call my cell phone. Or again, you can leave a message here in the office at church, and we will add your prayer request to our list. Now we'll ask you to bow your heads and to pray with me. God of heaven and earth, our creator and our sustainer, we have suddenly recognized in a way that's new, at least for many of us, that we are not in control. We are less certain about the future than we thought we were. And that uncertainty is hard. For some in our congregation, God, it brings uncertainty about their own medical treatment and whether or not they will be able to get what they need. For some in our community, it brings a sense of intense loneliness because they cannot be physically near. or be touched by the people that they love. For some in our community, it brings fear because of job uncertainty. God, how will bills get paid? How will groceries be purchased? God, holy God, closer to us than the air that we breathe in and breathe out. Give us hope, a powerful sense of your presence, not just a feeling, God, but your life-giving energy that enlivens our lives. Our hope is in you, God, all the day long. And now I invite you to join me in the prayer that Jesus gave to the disciples. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Our journey in Mark, the Gospel of Mark, takes us now to chapter 13. And I would say Mark chapter 13 is one of the most complex and most argued about chapters in all of the four Gospels. And I will admit, just a tiny little bit, I was tempted to skip this chapter. But here we are. In chapter 13 of the Gospel of Mark, Jesus predicts the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. And there are phrases like, when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, and kingdoms will rise against kingdoms, and there'll be famines, and there'll be earthquakes, and there's the dramatic imagery of the stars falling from the skies. The whole chapter is quite dramatic. So to radically oversimplify, there are two extreme ways of looking at this chapter. One, to the extreme way, is to use this dramatic imagery to try to predict the end of the world. And we've all seen that in our lifetime. There have been people who thought somehow they were special enough to read the signs, and they named the date that the world would end. That's one extreme way of looking at a chapter like this. The other extreme way is maybe to kind of ignore the chapter and say, well, I don't really know what this has to do with the gospel of Christ, to not really pay attention to it much or take it seriously. But I would suggest that there is a third way, a way that we will take it seriously. We will reflect on it without the temptation to go off the deep end and speculate about a date for the end of the world. The focus of the passage becomes then, how do I live today? In the middle of life that is unsettled and uncertain, which is the life they were living, in the middle of life's uncertainty, how do I live today as a follower of Jesus? I like to think of this passage as a rumble strip. Now, those of you who only do city driving may not be as familiar with rumble strips as some of the rest of us, but when I go to rural Missouri to visit my parents, I travel a lot of two-lane highways, and there are not only rumble strips on each edge of the highway, but there's also a rumble strip down the middle of the highway, so that you are kept on the straight and narrow. And if you were to ask my girls from their younger days, they would tell you, Mom loves to drive on the right side of the road, and she's always hitting the rumble strip. So there we go. Rumble strips are meant to keep us down the straight and narrow. Stay awake. Keep alert. So as Mark tells this unfolding story, he's getting us ready for the last week of Jesus' life. And to do that, he uses apocalyptic language, Such a fun word. You should just say that at home. Apocalyptic. But what that word really means is this: an apocalypse is a revelation. A revelation that reshapes the way we see things. So here's what's happening. The death of Jesus on the cross and his resurrection, it is an apocalypse or a revelation in which the disciples will, their image or understanding of God will be reshaped. So in chapter 13, Jesus speaks to his disciples to get them ready for the apocalypse, or the revelation that is to come, which is the death and resurrection of Jesus, which will reshape the way they understand who God is and how God is present. So, here's our rumble strip for today. Stay awake, keep alert. Chapter 13, in summary, at the beginning, predicts the destruction of the temple at Jerusalem and that the earth will tremble. Now, there is imagery for what God will do in the future. But I need you to hear me say that this passage for the early church, it was not about what God would do in the future. It's about what they needed God to do right there and then. They were the generation that saw the temple in Jerusalem being destroyed, just as Jesus said it would. And particularly the Roman Christians were living in the midst of war and persecution. The early church needed this as a word of hope that God was present then. And the disciples, they didn't know even then how much they would need this, but their life was about to be turned upside down. And so the words that Jesus gave them were a word to say, God is near. So picking up in chapter 13 at verse 32. But about that day or hour, no one knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. Beware, keep alert, for you do not know when the time will come. It's like a man going on a journey when he leaves home and puts his servants in charge, each with their own work to do, and commands the doorkeeper to be on the watch. Therefore, keep awake, for you do not know when the master of the house will come home, in the evening, or at midnight, or when the rooster crows, or at dawn. Or else the master may find you asleep when he comes suddenly. What I say to you, I say to all, keep awake. Verse 32 starts with this phrase, the day or the hour, no one knows. The angels don't know, the Son doesn't know. When God will be on the move, no one knows. Whatever it is that the future holds for this world as we know it, that is not our concern. How and when God will work out the future, that is not where our focus will be, because we cannot know that. You cannot know the future. So in verse 33, when he says, keep alert, what is it that we are to keep alert about? And in order to answer that question, Jesus does what Jesus normally does, and that is tell a story. So Jesus says it's like a man who owns, let's say, a business. And the owner is going on a business trip. The owner leaves the workers in charge, and each of them has a task. And the owner expects that they will do that. It seems that the doorkeeper is in charge, and so it becomes the doorkeeper's job to watch. Stay alert. Why? Verse 35, because they don't know when the owner plans to return. But when the owner returns, I'm confident it will be with the expectation that they have carried out their assigned work. No slacking off because the boss is out of town. Show up on time for work. You know that the one day you come in late will be the day that the boss comes home and you will get caught. Therefore, keep awake. And then there's this phrase, in the evening, at midnight, when the rooster crows, or at dawn. Those are the 4 watches of night in the Roman system. So why would Mark name these 4 watches of night? Well, Mark is getting us ready now for the last day of Jesus' life. In chapter 14, verse 17, when it was evening, Jesus gathered with the disciples for the Lord's Supper. In chapter 14, verse 32, in the Garden of Gethsemane, their prayer vigil takes place in the midnight. And there the disciples cannot do what Jesus asked them to do. Jesus said, "Stay awake," and they fell asleep. And in the end, Judas comes with betrayal, and Jesus is arrested. And then, while Jesus is on trial, Peter is denying that he ever knew Jesus. But when the rooster crows, Peter realizes his betrayal. And then in chapter 15, verse 1, as soon as the morning dawned, they bound Jesus and led him away. Stay awake. Be alert. You do not know when God will be on the move, evening, midnight, when the rooster crows, or when the morning dawns. That was a strong word for the disciples and a word of hope for the early church. The question is, what does it say to us? Instead of focusing on the end times then, let's focus on the work that the owner of the business has left for the workers to do. What is the work that we have been given? Now that Jesus is no longer physically present, do we know the mission of following Jesus? If you go back to Mark in chapter 8, for those of you who were able to be at the Ash Wednesday service, Jesus gave some pretty specific instructions to those who want to follow Jesus, or in the image of this story, to those who are workers in the business. Jesus was very clear about those instructions. If we want to take care of business while Jesus is gone, we will deny ourselves, take up our cross, and in that way we will follow Jesus. Those are the instructions. Those are the assignments that are given to the workers. We can imagine this owner giving to those who were to be at work while the owner was gone. Deny yourselves. We're getting a little bit of practice at that right now, denying ourselves. For Christians, the fact that we have been asked to commit to a season of quarantine gives us a whole new way to give up something for Lent. Now more than ever, for the sake of the world, deny yourself. Think carefully about those essential trips that you must make outside your home for the sake of the medical community, for the sake of your neighbor, for the sake of the world. It begins here. No better time now than to ask what it means to deny yourself. And secondly, Jesus left a very specific instruction: take up your cross. There are so many ways of thinking about what the cross means, but one way to think about the cross is that it represents for us the purposes of God. And so to take up our cross is to join with God in the purpose of God. The cross reminds us that we must be willing to do the hard stuff. It's not magic, the way God works in the world. If we would follow the story Jesus told us, that the workers must work while the owner is gone, it requires our partnership and our sacrifice. There is work for us to do. And the primary question of following Jesus and taking up our cross is not how much does it cost, or can we afford it, or do I have time? The primary question of taking up our cross and following Jesus is, does this align with the purposes of God? Does it fit with who we believe God is calling us to be? If the answer is yes, then the cross reminds us that we get down to the business of whatever sacrifice it takes to walk the way that God calls us to walk. And Jesus is very clear about something else. The primary purpose of God is that we would love God with our whole heart, body, soul, mind, and strength. And we do that by loving our neighbor as we love ourselves. On this, hang every decision you make through these next days and weeks of isolation. Stay awake. Keep alert. God is on the move, and you do not want to miss out on the opportunity to be the presence of Christ today. We come to the table today. The table is for us a place of hope, and the reminder that hope is not just a feeling that we feel. Hope is the active, energetic presence of God which enlivens our very hearts and souls, and that which we offer to the world around us. So together, as we come to the table, we are reminded of this practice of hope. That the night Jesus sat with his disciples would be the very night that he was betrayed. Yet he took the bread, and he blessed it, and he broke it. And he gave it to them, saying, "This is my body, which is broken for you. Eat this in remembrance of me." And in the same way, he took the cup, and having blessed it, he gave it to them, saying to them, "This is the new covenant that I have given to you, which is to say, love one another as I have loved you." Whenever we eat this bread and drink this cup, we proclaim what we believe, that Christ is our foundation and our hope. And now, as we go from this place, may the grace that we practice connect us one to another. May the love of the God we seek transform our hearts as together we take up our cross to follow Jesus, to the glory of God and for the healing of the woundedness in our lives and in the lives of those around us. Amen.